Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it. Hey everyone, welcome to the FigureItOutcast for February 2022. As always, I am joined by the evil Rob Thanos. Actually, you weren't even here last month, were you?
No, you don't know what you got till it's gone.
Yeah, I guess that's true, but I don't know. It was kind of nice, but anyway, so he's back.
Nice.
But Rob is a Patreon tier. Essentially, he's the DLC, as we say on this podcast. This is a Patreon-backed podcast. Of course, you can listen to it for free at the end of the month on the main channel. But if you subscribe to Patreon, you get access to it early, as well as all the videos that are put out. You can also pick subjects. You can get shout-outs, and you can be on the podcast. And speaking of which, Abdullah is back. What's up, man?
Hey, how are you guys?
It's good.
Not too bad.
I missed you.
Yeah. Well, likewise. And
I missed Abdullah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I shifted my schedule just for Rob.
Oh, I love you, Abdullah.
Yeah, we had this long discussion about it.
Let's keep that to the DMs, please.
We had a long discussion about it, and it was like, fine, we have to tolerate Rob. So Abdullah was cool enough to stay up very late for him.
We're a package deal at this point. Yeah.
You literally weren't here last month. Let's just do Abdullah a favor and get on with it so he can get some sleep. So Abdullah's been sitting on this subject for quite some time, but you, Rob, have been a fool and not been around. So it's finally time. Abdullah, please share with us your magical subject.
Okay, so this quote-unquote magical subject is, well, I wouldn't say it's super magical, but...
Sorry, I've been watching a lot of I Dream of Jeannie lately. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so it's related to the fact that why not introduce tests, some sort of standardized general examinations for people who work in game stores, but specifically I'm referring to retro game stores, like not any general game store, like people who sell things that are mostly oriented towards collectors, for example. So why not introduce some sort of generalized examinations to know that, to assist that they know some basic information, general knowledge of how the market kind of works or how the market can shift at least. So as a result of that, the reason I came up with the subject is because I am friends with a game shop owner here, and I believe I mentioned him in one of the early podcasts I've been in. So recently, in the past few months, him and I have taken the time to write some questions to assist that guy's knowledge, and unfortunately, he's failed almost all of the exams. That's a long story to talk about, but regardless of whatever he scored, he tried to learn, which is something really nice. I really appreciate that. But overall, I kept thinking about why not making this some sort of standard to make sure that you have an employee that's at least well aware of how the basic things work.
So the basic idea is, first of all, should there be some sort of standardized test for retro game stores? I don't think that would go over very well in the real world, but in our fun little fantasy world, let's just say that everybody agreed to do that. I really just want to find out if Rob would get fired. So let's pretend we live in a world where you need this test, and Rob never took it. He just accidentally got in. We're going to find out right now if Rob gets to keep his job or not. Everybody out there, see if you can play along. Pause as we're going if you need to. But see if you can answer these questions and see if, if Abdullah, eventually, he's, UAE, you're going to strike oil at some point. You're going to become very wealthy. We all know that's how that works. Just like every American eventually ends up in Hollywood. That's what happens. So you're going to make a ton of money and you're going to open a big game store. You're going to need employees. That's the scenario. So can you work at Abdullah's retro game store? Abdullah, present the questions to us. Let's do this.
Yeah.
So for example, one of the questions would be, of the Nintendo 64 games below, the rarest one of them is, so A would be Mario 64, or Super Mario 64, Donkey Kong 64, Superman 64, or Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut.
Well, that'd be Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut.
Yes.
Because that was a Blockbuster rental exclusive. So.
Yes.
Boo.
So So the question actually asks you to answer the question and then justify why you picked that answer, which is what you just said.
Yeah, so Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut is actually kind of the second Clay Fighters game on the N64. The first one being 66 and a third, I believe. 63 and a third, yeah. The Sculptor's Cut was exclusive to Blockbuster here in the United States, so it's very rare to find a complete in-box copy, let alone...
To be fair, and Canada.
Yeah, and Canada. And, the going rate for it right now is about $1,000 for a loose copy.
Now see, you jumped way overboard from what the question wants, and that's really good, actually. But the Nintendo 64 North American library has roughly 300 games, in a rough estimate.
Yes, it's just that is true. It's just under 300.
Yeah, it's 200 something. I don't
280 something. I think 284. I think.
Okay, so so during the N64 era, Nintendo kept its dominance from the previous generation.
False.
Yes, that's a false statement.
False. They shot themselves in the foot.
Exactly.
They even lost to the Saturn in Japan.
They did. That's saying something.
And the third one would be the Nintendo 64 is a revolutionary console that let's say defined the shift of 2D to 3D. Was one of the defining consoles that had the shift from 2D to 3D.
Yeah, I would say true because it was the first console to really have a standard analog stick for 3D video games. The DualShock followed after that, as did the Saturn 3D controller.
So it was one of the consoles that defined the transition phase.
Yes.
Of 2D to 3D.
Yeah,
because the previous generation was all about 2D.
Yeah.
Super Mario 64 itself is proof of that.
Well, I mean, there's one question. It's impossible for him to understand this one.
Do it. Perfect.
It's impossible.
Let me get it.
I know it's
Let's do it. Bring it on.
Fine. It's just translate the following statements from English to Arabic.
Yeah, do it. That's perfect.
So we actually.
You are so fired, Rob.
Let me quiz you, Abdullah. So
I'd probably fail in this.
So So this is one of the questions that I know is on the Digital Press application. Name 3 handheld video game systems that were not made by Nintendo or Sony.
Okay, that's interesting. So, can I use the same what's it called?
Manufacturer.
Manufacturer, yeah.
Yeah, so not Nintendo or Sony.
Yes,
that's actually a tough one because
no PSP or no Vita, yeah.
So maybe the Wonder Swan.
Okay, Bandai Wonder Swan.
Game Gear.
That's 2.
Neo Geo.
Yeah, there you go. So that's very difficult, So I encourage.
It's actually a difficult question. It's not easy. Yeah.
So I'll tell people. I'll give them a hint. It's like Atari made one. Like Sega made 2 of them. Sega made 2 of them.
Well, Nomad does not count.
It's a handheld.
Doesn't count.
Not
Portable
made.
Genesis.
Hey,
well, you should say that. You should maybe just.
I did say that, and I got Sega's agreement on that one because I did their 60th anniversary videos, buddy.
Well, Sega wouldn't get a job at Digital Press then, would they? Because
fair enough.
So
okay. So the one of the other questions would be name 3 video game consoles, either portable or at a home, that were made before the NES.
Okay, so you want me to answer?
Yeah.
Well, the Odyssey.
Odyssey, yes.
Atari and Vectrex.
Which Atari?
Atari 2600.
There you go. Okay, so yeah, so that would be that. So we give them this quiz, and that's really a way of gauging their knowledge. They also give them like genre tests, like name an RPG, name a platformer, name a first person shooter, name a strategy game.
There were some questions that were tailored to specific case here, and you might not face this case there. Is that I gave him like the voltage of a certain console, and I told him that suppose a guy came in from Canada wanting to buy this console, like will you tell him to get a step down or not?
Yeah. No, I think that's
if he's
really
in
good
UAE,
thing.
then yeah. So
For,
you're getting my point.
Yeah,
That's
no,
what I'm saying.
for a place like you where you're importing a lot of consoles, both
Big time, yeah.
from Asia, from Japan, and from the U.S. and Europe, like that, you're getting a lot of that. So it's step down converters, voltage converters it's all stuff that needs to be taken into account. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're a little spoiled on that one because Japanese stuff, you should do that, but you don't really have to.
Yeah.
It doesn't really. It's not gonna affect you that much.
Yeah, it'll work, but over time it'll chew away the power supply. But it would have to be an excessive amount of use. And then the truth is, aside from the super collectors like myself, nobody's importing like the European exclusive consoles because there just aren't that many.
Yeah.
Like an Amstrad GX 4000 or whatever.
Amiga or something. Yeah.
Even a CD32, there's a Canadian version.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Granted, it's harder to get, but point is, it's very rare for people in North America to have to deal with step-down converters, unless they really are looking for it.
So Adam, what do you think? Like, if you had to, let's say you're a store owner and you were kind of putting together one of these employee quizzes for new hires, like, what's one question that you would add to?
I'm going to try and mutate that because I never worked in a game store. However, I had a friend who worked in an all-purpose media store, sold DVDs, Blu-rays, games, that sort of thing. And I remember I used to just go over there and hang out with her because she would get bored. I had nothing better to do, so I'd hang out in the store. But anytime video game stuff would come in, she didn't really know enough about that, so she'd be like, "Hey, can you check this out?" Whatever. So the only incident I really remember was this guy came in with a GameCube collection, and this was back in 2004, 2005, so it was still relevant. And so it was a decent enough collection, but one of the things in there was the Game Boy player, and then she looked at it like, does this need something else? And the guy was like, no, it's you just need the thing. And then she kind of looked over at me, and I was like, no, it needs a boot disc. And the guy looked really mad at me, really pissed off. And I was like, no, there's this special boot disc that goes with it. So if you have that, I'm sure it's fine. And he was like, oh, I think I have that at home. I'll go see if I can find it. I'll come back. But also he had a bunch of disc only games, and their store policies, they just didn't take that because they're just we only take basically complete stuff.
Yeah.
Because nobody buys, or at least I guess they felt nobody buys disc only stuff. So he had a few of them, and he had to take those, and he took the Game Boy player back. He sold the rest there. He came back a couple hours later with the Game Boy player as well as a disc, claiming that it was in fact the boot disc. Now the issue with this disc is that it was the top of it, the label was entirely black. Just for no apparent reason. And so she's looking at it is it supposed to just be a black disc? Is that normal? And the guy was really kind of I don't know how to say, he was kind of boxing me out from going anywhere near her, which was really kind of weird. But then, inevitably that didn't stick. So she handed me the disc, and I looked at it, and I looked at it real quick for a second. I'm like, this is a, I just said it out loud because I was just kind of stunned. I'm like, this is a copy of Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance that you just put Sharpie all over. And he looked so incredibly pissed off. And then he yelled at me. He was like, dude, you don't work here. She works here. This is her decision, not yours. And I was like, all right. So I backed off, and she's like,
yeah, we're not going to
take this. And he got really, really mad, and he just stormed out of the store. And it was a thing. It was just a thing.
So he wanted to scam, and you caught on to him.
Basically, unintentionally. I just it's obvious. But to me, it's obvious, but to her, it wasn't. So I guess I would say you need to coach people on hardware that requires extra things if they don't know any better. Game Boy Player is a perfect example of that. If it doesn't have that disc, it's essentially junk. Unless it's the right buyer who's just looking to get just the player. But people don't know that. So I'm going to take the somewhat unpopular road here. It's easy for us as guys who are super passionate about this to sit here and be like, everyone should have to pass a special quiz that shows their knowledge. And I don't necessarily disagree on this particular subject, but I will say that if you applied that policy to every sort of job, it would be very hard for anyone to really ever get a job. Like, do you think the people working at McDonald's know the extreme details about how every burger is prepared? Probably not. It's like a high school job initially, that you just kind of start learning the basics of how to work, but also that, you know, you can probably learn how to cook it, and you learn the very specifics of what you need to fulfill that job. Yep. And I guess what I'm saying is, if you're creating this filter that makes it too hard for anyone to get into that job, then you potentially kill off your industry, because we already live in a world where, we already live in a world where retro games are already a niche thing. And I think we talked about this on another podcast. Like, there's not a whole lot of retro game stores that are popping up and like probably going to survive. So to cut that off is weird. I understand on paper why it's great to have a level of knowledge for that base. Don't misunderstand me. But I guess what I'm saying is, if you make that filter too thick, you just won't have a workforce.
You need to.
So I'm just trying to look at it from the other side as well. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, look, it needs to be dealt in a case-by-case basis, and it's not. It's not about asking specific detailed questions. Like, for example, people like us who are really into this might like detailed questions because it's going to be some sort of challenge. But if you think about it, these questions, most of them are actually quite basic for anybody who's worked there for, let's say, 2 to 3 years. I'm talking about experienced people, not people who have zero experience.
Yeah, but I mean, I do hear like both sides, and I think it is a balancing act. Just to kind of wrap up, my final thoughts is, I do think it's important to kind of like gauge the knowledge of employees for a new place, especially one where, yes, retro games are niche, but it is a very lucrative industry because of the prices of a lot of these things. So being able to make informed decisions is really important. If somebody brings a fake sculptor's cut into a store and they charge $1,000 for it, and then like somebody gets ripped off, then it's like then you're dealing with a lot of negative attention. So, but at the same time, I think it's important to be able to tailor your questions in an assessment, for a new employee.
You have to factor in the experience, how much that, for example, when I tailored these questions, it was for a person who works in here with 2 to 3 years of experience and such, and so.
Absolutely,
So
and kind of the ones that I've presented, like some of them are challenging, but like if you got more questions wrong than you did right on the digital press application, doesn't mean that you're not going to get a call back and we're going to interview you. It's like we recognize that it's a process, and you're going to learn while you're here.
That's not the only factor. It's not a make or break kind of situation.
Yes, it's not Jeopardy. It's it's a business, and businesses give opportunities to people to grow. At least good businesses should. So. Absolutely, but I like this. I like the sentiment that you were bringing forward.
I also just like to go out with this. I like that technically, because of the translation question, Rob failed and is fired. So that's a win for me. I will take that.
Oh, okay.
So thank you very much, Abdullah, for this subject. And so now we're going to move on and do a round of shout-outs here. So, shout-outs. The following people are all Patreon backers. They are at the level in which they get a shout-out. You can join at any time to be part of that, or upgrade, or whatever, and then you get additional benefits on top of it, such as early access. We got Jonathan Barrett, Julian Espinoza, Luis Bonilla, Loke, Michael Kelly, and Trey Wagner. Once again, that's Jonathan Barrett, Julian Espinoza, Luis Bonilla, Loke, Michael Kelly, and Trey Wagner. Thank you all so much. Joseph, I believe you wanted to just get straight into this. Your subject was pretty direct with the recent events at the time we're recording this. I narrowed it way down, but you can elaborate on it. First, Microsoft acquires Activision, then Sony acquires Bungie. Go.
What? That happened? What?
That did indeed happen.
How come nobody told me?
I don't know.
I don't even know where to start with this because it's such a fertile thing. So, yeah. Joseph, do you want to just take point?
Yeah. I guess so. I mean, like I said, this is going to dive into the second topic a bit, but obviously at this point, like, Microsoft buying Activision is pretty huge. Like, they've already bought Bethesda beforehand, but this is just an entirely different level of it, and it's... I don't think I remember there being, like, any, like, large-scale acquisition like this from any, like, console manufacturer before. Has that ever happened?
Not on that scale. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a $68 billion deal. Dude, Disney paid less than that for Fox.
They paid less than that for Star Wars.
Well, a lot less. But Fox was like $58 billion or something like that.
Yeah, and that
I mean,
was
this
all
is
of
like...
Fox except Fox News. So...
And Fox Sports.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, FTC wouldn't let them take those two, but everything else, the entertainment division, they got. But still, they paid like $58 billion for like a century's worth of content. And Microsoft's like, lol, hold my beer. Like, I'm gonna buy Spyro. Like, that was $68 billion. Now, it's not like it's not a bunch of cash. It's basically investment assets. So they essentially sell them Microsoft stock. But it's just kind of insane. Like, I agree with you. Like, there's never been a merger on that scale in video game history specifically. I don't even know how many acquisitions in all of corporate history have been that big. I'm sure there are examples, but that's massive.
Yeah. So, and that's probably gonna, assuming that the FTC actually approves it and it doesn't get blocked or anything. Which,
I mean, technically they can do that, but I would be stunned if they did.
I don't think they would either. They don't really seem to care about like entertainment stuff all that much. I mean, otherwise Disney would have never been able to get Fox.
Yeah, that's a point that I think people need to understand, because I see this misclicking, in on YouTube. There's a bunch of clickbait being like, FTC reviewing it, in trouble. It's like, no, they literally review every merger. That's the whole point of doing that. And that's exactly why, by the way, Disney could not acquire Fox News or Fox Sports, because they already own ABC News and ESPN. So that's considered a monopolistic practice. The FTC specifically prevented that, but they had nothing against the entertainment side of things. Microsoft basically buying development studios and IPs is not going to conflict with anything.
Yeah.
Did someone just launch a motorcycle in their house?
The motorcycle just went past my apartment complex.
Oh, nice.
It sounded like it was right next to
It sounded like you were just driving away off the podcast.
And that's when Joseph mounted his Harley Davidson and took off into the night. Yeah. Never to return. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, go on.
Yeah, so obviously there's things that need to be considered with this. Like, everyone's been basically like talking about it, and I'm wondering, I mean, where do you two stand on the whole thing, what you think Microsoft's going to end up doing with a lot of Activision's like main franchises like Call of Duty? Because I know it's been said that Call of Duty is going to remain on PlayStation, but do you guys think that's actually likely? Or
who do you want to start talking about this, me or him?
You can start, Adam.
Okay. So the Bethesda merger already gave you the blueprint for what happens here. They follow the deals that existed prior to the merger, and meaning in Bethesda's case, they were like, okay, I think it was Deathloop specifically. They're like, yeah, that's going to remain on PlayStation, and we're going to continue to support cross-platform. All the things that already existed will. Things that did not will not. So, for example, remember kind of famously when they were like, Elder Scrolls is going to be on PC and Xbox only. It's like, does that surprise anybody? It's not going to be on PlayStation. And it's because it wasn't part of a pre-existing deal. So basically, from Microsoft's perspective, they're just going to probably honor whatever Activision already had lined up. So yeah, Call of Duty will technically remain on PlayStation, probably for one or two more games. But after that, that original contractual window is over, And I guarantee they're going to come up with some sort of excuse other than, hey, we just feel like doing it ourselves. It's going to be something like, hey, Sony doesn't want to do cross-platform, and that's really important to us, so we can't do it, sorry. Or some other, message like that. I can almost guarantee you that will be the case. So I really feel that Microsoft inevitably is just going to, keep those... I'm not going to even call it exclusive, because if you think about it, they have it on 2 platforms. They have it on their own ecosystem as well as PC. They seem relatively willing to even share it with PC competitors, be it someone like a Steam or an Epic or whatever. They allow that. And they're even willing to share stuff with Nintendo. Granted, it's kind of limited due to Nintendo's hardware, but they typically play ball with each other, which actually, by the way, is how we might actually finally get the re-release of GoldenEye. Because you know who was one of the 3 rights holders to GoldenEye 64? Oddly enough, it was Activision, because they owned the James Bond game rights. So now Microsoft now has 2 of 3 parts, and they're working with Nintendo on the pretty regular. Would not surprise me if they finally cut a deal to put that 360 hack, or if not even a hack, that like incomplete game they were working on, that proof of concept. If they decide, hey, that could easily run on modern Xbox hardware as well as Switch hardware, screw it. Now let's just do it. That wouldn't surprise. That's a separate subject, but. The reason that in of itself is kind of relevant, it basically tells you everything you need to know. Microsoft is very willing to work with its corporate opponents. It's actually Sony that's not. And I kind of get why, because for them, it's a very different business model. But Nintendo and Microsoft don't see each other as competitors, whereas Sony sees everybody as a competitor. But while mergers are kind of scary, to be honest, when it's like one company having that much power, it does come with certain little fringe benefits. I'm not saying they're worth it, but they do exist. Now, as I said with GoldenEye, very specific example, 2/3 of the game's rights are now under one company's umbrella, making it vastly more likely that we eventually win on that one. Is that worth it? Probably not. I'm sure a lot of people would argue that it's not. But it's kind of interesting. I'm just saying there's ups and downs with that type of thing. I think that there's a very good chance that Activision's bigger content, again, as we've pointed out, things like Call of Duty and so on and so forth, will eventually no longer have a home on PlayStation hardware unless, for some reason, Sony is willing to capitulate on certain demands. But if that's the case, then Microsoft really had no reason to do this. So they can say all they want about how we're going to put it on PlayStation, and they probably will say that, A, because they have to honor those contracts, but B, because technically, yes, the FTC has the power to prevent this, and if they come out publicly and just kind of basically continue to honor what was already agreed to, then it doesn't look like a merger. It doesn't look like a monopoly, I should say. So that would be my take on that. But I think one of the other perks it might come of it is, if you guys remember, the Xbox backwards compatibility program basically ended, citing the reason that it's too hard to deal with rights holders. Well, you just inherited Activision, which is one of the biggest... Activision, for those who don't know, Activision is literally the first third-party developer in video game history. They are the oldest one ever. Spawned off of disgruntled Atari employees. That's their origin. They have a mammoth amount of IPs and content beyond just the ones that people are kind of thinking about in the more modern sense. So that actually gives them a ton of potential to be like, hey, you know what? We're going to relaunch the backwards compatibility program. Look at all these games that Activision owns, lock, stock, and barrel for the original Xbox and the 360. There's going to be stuff you can't do, like Spider-Man stuff. Activision had the rights to. They know now Sony does. So you can't do that. But, there's going to be a bunch where that's not really a problem. And that could even, again, as I pointed out, now includes all the previous Bond games that were available on, well, maybe like the GoldenEye 360 game specifically was Activision. And that comes with the rights as well. Now it's all under one umbrella. So it's got its perks, but at the same time, it does eliminate competition. And that is never really a good thing. So I'm of 2 minds on this. I'm trying to find the silver lining in all the potential positives that come with that stuff. But you got to look at it the same way you do when it comes to when Disney bought Fox, as we keep citing. It's like, yeah, it's cool. All our favorite Marvel characters can basically be under one roof again. But now we only have 5 entertainment media companies instead of 6, which is already not much.
Yeah.
So you see what I'm saying? It's got its pluses, it's got its minuses.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you on that for sure. Like, there's one there's one kind of sort of way I can maybe see Microsoft still putting Call of Duty on PlayStation after all current agreements are done with, but it's very iffy and not likely. And will almost certainly come up in the next topic, so I'll save it for then. But, Rob?
So, I'm very much with Adam on I would say the ethics of this takeover. Less options is never a good thing. I see the urge to kind of jump on the bandwagon and say it's like, oh, this is going to be really good value added for Game Pass, which is I really think that Xbox's main focus about this is wanting these games on Game Pass day one. They want the new Call of Duty on Game Pass day one. I could see them maybe tying in World of Warcraft, which is still one of the biggest PC games out there, tying a WoW subscription to Game Pass or Xbox Live Gold. I think that would be a massive development. But where I differ is my initial instinct is to believe that they will not squirrel these franchises away to be exclusive on Xbox, because I feel that Microsoft is of the mind, to use an analogy which Adam, I think, himself has used. Microsoft is the business model where you give away the razors to sell the blade. They don't care necessarily where you're playing their games. They don't care where they're on, where you're using Game Pass, as long as you're playing their games and you're using their Game Pass subscription, and using their Xbox Live, subscription. So I could see them keeping. I mean, I'll call it what it is. Call of Duty is the biggest video game franchise on the planet from an annual, in earnings perspective. A successful Call of Duty game will make that money back, that whatever 70 billion, 68 billion, it'll make that back by itself. Call of Duty.
I don't know about that.
But
I mean, eventually, yeah.
Eventually, it will. It would. I think it would pay for itself.
Has GTA 5 even done that? $68 billion? Do you realize how big of a number that actually is?
I don't know. I mean, I really, listen, it's besides the point. What I think is that they see Call of Duty as they're going to be making money on this thing regardless. I don't see them taking that ball and going home and forcing people to game on Xbox or PC if they want to play that Call of Duty. I think they see PlayStation, once again, not as their competitor. I think they see them as an avenue to make more money. So I could easily see Xbox going to Sony and saying, listen, we're going to honor this pre-existing contract. This contract is going to end eventually. When this contract ends, we want to keep Call of Duty on a PlayStation console. How are we going to make this work? And I think
I have the negotiation for that, by the way, but continue.
And I think the negotiation is going to come down to, you have Call of Duty on your console, but you're also going to have Game Pass on your console.
Yeah, that was exactly where I was going. You would not get a download or a physical Call of Duty available for PS5, but you gotta agree to let us put Xbox Game Pass as a service on the PlayStation ecosystem. Anybody can go in and play, the new Call of Duty all they want on PlayStation hardware. That's one of those tough pill to swallow moments for Sony. And one of those, I genuinely have no idea which way that ball would fall, because
Sony has a lot of pride.
That's where I'm going. The American side of them, which doesn't actually make the decisions, contrary to what everybody says. Sony moved to California. No, they didn't. You don't know what you're talking about. They did not. They just moved the PlayStation branch there, which ultimately has to do whatever the Sony Japan tells them to do. But anyway, that branch would probably be like, okay, that actually kind of makes sense. You know, like we would not be out on all these games if we just agree to have Game Pass on there. And then they would theoretically get a cut of Game Pass every time somebody signs on. So to them, it would look lucrative. But to the Japanese who ultimately make that decision, that may look like, you know, letting the fox into the chicken coop. You know what I mean? Like it seems like a cannibalistic practice, and also one that is anti-pride, if you will. It just seems like you're surrendering. So I don't know what they would do.
I mean, as I said, it's like Microsoft didn't do this because they're realistically, they're not going to win this console generation. They've never won a console generation. Why would it start now?
They've never even made money on a generation.
Yeah, they've
lost every single one, and this just proves it. Like they just spent $68 billion on a single company.
Yeah,
like a year after they spent how much they spent on Bethesda? Like 30? I don't remember the number. Are you kidding? They're not making that back.
That's walking around.
Not anytime soon. No.
It's so like I honestly like they're doing this to make money. That's plain and simple. Like they see dollar signs in here. So the thing is, like, you need to examine this and say, where is this revenue going to come from? The revenue, like, a lot of it is going to come from PC, because they look at things like Diablo and StarCraft and World of Warcraft and Hearthstone and all these Blizzard properties that are going to go really, really nice with Game Pass for PC. And as said, really like expect them to tie in a World of Warcraft subscription to that. That way you have all these big PC franchises under one roof. Next, the one that people aren't talking about in here, when you're talking about the franchises, you're talking, Call of Duty and Warcraft and Tony Hawk and Spyro and Crash Bandicoot. It's like, yeah, that's all like well and good. Candy Crush makes a fuck ton of money. And this is Microsoft taking control of one of the biggest mobile cell phone games in the world. And this isn't just like America and Europe or Japan. This is the world. China. That's where Candy Crush is available on phones as well. So they're going to be making revenue from the freemium game model that Candy Crush is going to bring with this. So, as I said, like, my first instinct is to like think, it's like, why would they wall themselves off? They don't care about consoles. They don't care about console generations. They don't care about competing with Microsoft, with Sony and Nintendo. They see this as an opportunity to have more games under their roof that they can put on other systems and get passive revenue as opposed to active revenue. Like, why would they suddenly change their entire corporate philosophy over over their console division and suddenly put all of their focus into beating Sony and beating Nintendo in the 9th generation? I don't see them doing that. I see them saying, like, hey, it doesn't matter where you're playing these games. We're making money regardless. Let's put this on as much fucking things as humanly possible. Let's put Call of Duty on the Switch. Why the fuck not? We'll do some basic bitch downgrades.
Because the Switch would melt.
Rob, part of that I was with you until the very end there, because we already know, based on the Bethesda merger, that that's not what they're doing. Like, there's already a bunch of the games that they've decided, like Elder Scrolls 6 is a perfect example of this. Like, it's
Starfield.
we already know those are not coming to PlayStation.
Yeah, like, that's one game.
They've made that choice consciously. Now, I believe that most likely, I mean, for them, it does better to keep those games off of Sony hardware, unless, as we described before, you kind of force Game Pass onto PlayStation hardware, which honestly I think is the play. Because it's the one company that really hasn't agreed to work with them. They don't really need to deal with PC. They basically own it. They obviously have their own ecosystem. And even Nintendo's willing to play ball. Granted, they're not as deep in, but there's clearly a working relationship there. I mean, Banjo-Kazooie keeps crossing over things. It sounds like the GoldenEye thing is resolved. I mean, they openly talk about this type of stuff with each other all the time. So it's just Sony that's the one that's kind of distant. And I really think that you kind of hit the nail on the head before when you're talking about, I think the long game gives Sony a reason to finally capitulate and put Game Pass on there. And because once you do that, and you have Game Pass, and you made a valid point about mobile, theoretically, with everybody kind of attached to Candy Crush, it's not hard to expand that into including Game Pass with that. So then you have Game Pass on PC, Xbox hardware, Sony hardware, mobile division, and theoretically Nintendo hardware. And then it becomes exactly what they set out to do all the way back in 2001, which is just make Xbox a brand that just gets into everything.
Yep. You know, the one thing I worry about is, in regards to the Game Pass, is I think that this is going to be, at least serve as the justification for an eventual price increase on Game Pass.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's because
of course.
Yeah, because like we've been saying for years now, Game Pass is the best fucking value in games. Was it $10 a month for Game Pass?
I don't have it.
I think that's what I get charged for Game Pass. It's like $10. So I think it's $15 if you do the PC and the console one. But if you're just doing the Xbox or just the PC, it's $10. That's right. So if it's $10 a month, and we've said, like, you get day one fucking AAA releases, all of Microsoft stuff goes on there. Now all of Bethesda's stuff. You get legacy content all the way back to the original Xbox, all the way through the 360 and the Xbox One. So there's a ton of value there. Now there's EA games. EA Play is on there. So you're going to get Madden day one on Game Pass. It's like, it's insane, the value. So now they're going to be able to say, well, if we're putting World of Warcraft and Call of Duty on here, then it's going to necessitate a price increase. Where that price increase ends up, whether it's $15 for the base or $20 for Game Pass Ultimate, is inconsequential. But it is indicative of the problem that Adam and myself, and I don't know how you feel about this, Joseph, but how Adam and myself feel about monopolistic business practices. Less options is never a good thing. So if Microsoft holds all the cards and has all of the things under their roof, then they could dictate the level of content and the price. So, and that is not a good thing, because you'll have no alternative. If you want to play Call of Duty, you're going to have to get Game Pass, because it's not going to be physically, probably starting next generation, available. And as you guys have theorized, it's probably, it might not be on PlayStation anymore. So you're going to have to, you're going to have to do Game Pass to be able to play this game. And then you've held consumers hostage. Now, Microsoft has done a really amazing job, I think we could all agree, over this 8th gen, from picking themselves out of the fucking crater that Don Matrick left them in at the start of the Xbox One generation, in terms of regaining consumer trust and making themselves a very consumer-friendly company through all of their things, such as Game Pass and their backwards compatibility program and other things. Don't think that they're your friends. They don't care about you. They care about making money. Corporations are not your friends. They never were. They never will be. And when you give them too much power, that's when it gets dangerous. And that's my concern, is is this going to be the start of a throttling of Game Pass's value in terms of increasing the price, or making or offering less variety in terms of games? Are you going to, cut off your arm to spite your leg or something by getting rid of something on Game Pass to bring in these new franchises? We don't know. Only time will tell.
Game Pass, I mean, I've been saying this kind of since it was first announced and launched, was Game Pass to me just comes off like the first taste is free, and then when you get addicted to the drug, you have to pay for it.
Yes, that is exactly how it is.
Because everyone everyone loves it who has it. I mean, even Rob, who's like dedicated to physical media, you're like, I can't turn it down. That's called addiction. Like that's what that is.
Yep.
And
I did. Let's put it this way. At like the end of last year, I bought an Xbox because my laptop came with Game Pass, and it suddenly made sense to get the console too. So
yeah.
I mean, granted, I did at least get the Series X and not the S, but even so,
boy.
I got
But
it.
I mean, why do you think they released the Series S in the first place? Is because it's a Game Pass machine. That is all it is.
Cheaper Game Pass machine. Yeah, they did it, guys, and it's gonna have. I mean, granted, technically, yes, the FTC could block it, and who knows? Maybe by the time this is public, they actually did, and this is all hilariously out of date. But, you know, I want to try and see all the positives in it, and I think in the short term you're going to see more positives than negatives, just because they have to fulfill those agreements like we've talked about before. They still technically have other competition they have to deal with, so you might get more games like backwards compatibility and GoldenEye. Those are like the little, you know, garnish around the edge that try to make the whole thing look better. But it's possible that the food itself is like rotting. And that's when we get to the future where, oh, I want to play video games. Well, then you have to have Game Pass, and now Game Pass is like, you know, $79.99 a month. Which, honestly, given the amount of content that's on it, is not even an unrealistic price.
Yeah, I mean,
think about it. That's a retail game.
I mean, you don't have to answer with like, you know, with an exact number, but it's like, do you spend more than $60 a month on video games?
Have you watched Playload?
Yeah. So in theory, it's like, yeah, there's your value. It's like the cost of one game, you get access to 100. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I get all that, and I get that, but like that's how they get you. Everybody who's listening right now, they have you addicted to the basically free drug, and at some point they up it, and they'll keep upping it, and that'll just keep being the way it is. I mean, look at Netflix. Every time they raise their price by like $2, everybody loses their minds. But Netflix has competition, especially lately with all those streaming services, some of which are actually quite good now. They still do it, and they still win.
Yep.
Microsoft is taking a different strategy that Netflix never did, in the fact that Microsoft's basically buying out all its competition. And because it's entertainment, I doubt there's going to be much change with that. It'll be very interesting to see. I actually read an article about this very recently, and the core point of it, not to detract too much, was that because of what Microsoft's doing, and to a lesser extent what Sony's doing, it's possible we might go back to the basically pre-unified gaming era. So like, if you remember, I mean, Rob, I know you know your history here, but like I would say by the time the 6th generation rolled around, we knew every console manufacturer there was going to be. Like Sega was still in there. Technically, you had VM Labs in the Nuon, which by the way was
pulling for the Nuon, yeah.
Yeah, but technically, by the way, that was. I mean, don't throw Hyperscan at me. That was not a real attempt to get in the market, or Ouya, or whatever. The VM Labs Nuon was the last non-major video game company or to actually make a legitimate effort with like a real plan to get into the video game industry. But I would say prior to that, even just going back one generation, the 5th generation, you still had a bunch of like weirdo consoles that just showed up and nobody knew what they're... You had, I mean, one generation before the Dreamcast is when you had the FM Towns Marty. That's when you had the Amiga CD32. You had a whole bunch of rando stuff that they never try anymore. So the article goes on to basically say, like, it's possible that because Microsoft has almost no interest in dealing with Japan anymore, and they really can't make any sort of dent in Asia, it's very possible that Microsoft will eventually just kind of go to North America, and Sony may just exclusively stick around in Japan. Because it'll just be too impossible for them to deal with this over here when it was kind of an interesting point. It was like you might be looking at this split where they no longer try in every region.
I mean, that's assuming that the growth of the PC gaming doesn't continue in Japan, because that's the thing about Xbox. Xbox is perfectly positioned because you don't have to own an Xbox to have Game Pass. You could have any goddamn PC will do it. You could have a fucking tablet do it. Your phone. I could play fucking Sea of Thieves on my phone.
Again,
you know,
that's what we were saying before. At that point, you can theoretically put Game Pass on everything. Your only two real holdouts are Nintendo, who I got to believe they're softening like crazy on it, and then Sony, who's probably honestly kind of panicking, which I think kind of leads into the other point we only briefly discussed, which was Sony acquired Bungie in response to this.
Well, hold on.
We don't know if it was
I don't know. We don't know technically if it was a response. Yes, those deals don't come that quickly.
Let me address that rumor, or that gossip specifically. Microsoft did not acquire Activision, and then Sony acquired Bungie in retaliation. Corporate mergers take more than how long has this fucking Microsoft?
Yeah, I'm aware. It's just the way it looks publicly. Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
It's that's the way it looks, and people are like, "Oh, look, Sony's firing back." It's like they've had this shit lined up and been talking about it for probably a year. Corporations don't figure out complex mergers of billions of dollars over lunch, or think about it over a weekend. Here's our proposal. It's Sony, this was a deliberate move by Sony, and yes, they could have heard things from Activision or from people in the know about Microsoft's plans, and they could have done that maybe a couple months ago when they had heard of that, and it kind of kick-started things with Bungie. But this is the Bungie is a good developer. They created Halo. They do not own Halo anymore, but Destiny is their big game. And it is a moneymaker. Destiny is still a popular game and still makes money through microtransactions every year, even though it's free to play. But comparing Bungie's, the acquisition of Bungie to comparing Activision Blizzard merger is comparing a grenade to an atom bomb. It's major leagues and T-ball. This is it is a different ball game entirely. Bungie has released one game in the past. When did Halo Reach come out? Halo Reach came out in 2010. That was the last game that they did for Microsoft. So since 2010, they have made 2 games, and it has been Destiny 1 and Destiny 2. That's all, because it is a freemium market. The game is free. Once again, the first hit is free, but once you're addicted, that's when all the microtransactions and all the fucking expansions come. So it's it is not in the same mode. I think the motive is the same. I think similar to things like Candy Crush or Call of Duty, which where the multiplayer is free and it's through microtransactions where you get all of that passive income and revenue. I think that's what Sony's doing. I think they acquired Bungie with probably foresight knowledge that Bungie is either working on a new IP or is going to release Destiny 3 in the next 5 years, and they're going to be able to siphon off and suckle that passive revenue from microtransactions and from game sales. But I could see Sony making Destiny free, Destiny exclusive. That's their right. They could do that. Although ironically, I don't know if this is true. I don't know how long the contract was. Do you guys know who's the publisher for the Destiny
Activision.
games, right?
I was about to say that. Activision was the publisher for the Destiny games. I was really? That feels like a divorce. From a distance.
So I don't think that's the case. If I recall, when
Bungie still owns Destiny.
But I also believe that the publishing deal was only for 10 years. Or a certain amount of time. I don't think it's in perpetuity. So I don't think
that the publishing deal was already over. And
it might be. I don't remember exactly how long that contract is from Bungie and Activision for Destiny publishing rights. But that'd be fucking hilarious. That's some roundabout corporate bullshit where it's a game that's exclusive on a Sony console is being published by a game company that's owned by their biggest competitor, that'd be hilarious if that publishing deal was still in place, but I don't think it is.
We're in this weird world where you can only laugh at how insane this is. Microsoft's all right, we need games. We don't, what, screw it. Let's just buy an entire major legacy company and just get all theirs. It's just easier. And then Sony just like, okay, well, this is what looks like their petty move. Because you're right. It didn't just happen overnight. They didn't just come up with, like, I think the only merger like that was that quick was kind of Star Wars, and that was because George had sole control over it. But aside from that, yeah, this was in the works for a while. But you look back at it, like, and it just looks like hilariously petty. And it's like, okay, well, so Microsoft now owns legacy content that seemed like Sony favorites, like, you know, Spyro and Crash are now essentially Xbox characters. So Sony turns around and buys the developer that created Halo. You know, it just looks like hilarious. Yeah. But you're like, dude, I don't know. We live in this weird world, and I don't think either of them are done. Like, I mean, honestly, like, what at this point, like, Microsoft's like, I'm no longer going to be surprised if, like, every year we find out they're like, hey, Microsoft's going to buy Ubisoft, Microsoft's going to buy EA, you know, like, it's just getting more and more ludicrous. And where I think it's interesting is it seems like Sony almost comes off like, we talked about this in the Game Pass episode. Like, they seem like they're totally blindsided by it. Like, I was reading an article the other day that said whatever Sony's working on Game Pass wise, like, theoretically isn't going to be ready for launch until like 2026. Like, they just had no plan.
Spartacus project.
Yeah, like they're like, it's 2026 they're aiming for, because the truth is they just didn't bet on it. They just did not think that was going to happen. And so now they're playing a ridiculous game of catch-up. And it kind of makes sense. Microsoft's like sitting around buying up assets. They more or less have been working on internet infrastructure since the original Xbox. And Sony just kind of always treated it as like, yeah, whatever. And like, even the way they handle their current stuff it's still kind of odd. So this might be their only move, is like try to absorb, you know, some developers here and there and get it prepared. But like they're essentially a decade behind.
Yeah.
And it's,
I mean, I don't think they have the technical infrastructure. I think, as we said in that, to be able to do this streaming thing. I mean, Google didn't. Didn't.
The Stadia is officially discontinued. Yeah.
Stadia's dead. Like, rest in peace. You know.
Wait, Stadia's death is actually official now?
It's official now, yeah. It was like the other day.
Yeah, they've basically took all of their people away from Stadia, and it's like, you know,
it's like, yeah, duh.
But
well, you know what? Yeah. Actually, we've said it multiple times now. We agree with competition. It's good to have that. I like that Sony is there because it's good for the industry to have more competition. But I'm not going to lie, dude. As I sit here and look at the way Sony is handling themselves, the fact that they split the PlayStation away from Sony to an extent by putting them in North America, while also basically forcing them to do Japanese things. You know who that reminds me of? That's what Sega did. Yeah, that's exactly what Sega did. And Sega's big mistake was they were like, okay, we're a Japanese company, but the Americans are making all the successful decisions. And eventually it was like, well, that's embarrassing, so let's do stupid things. And that's
sabotage.
And so that's where Sony gets into some trouble, man. They don't have the kind of capital that Microsoft has to be able to like just absorb companies left and right and whatever. But they do have one advantage that Microsoft does not, and I guess I'm not surprised anymore they haven't done this, given how far behind they seem to be. Like I said, Game Pass competitor might not launch for another 4 years. But one thing they can theoretically do is start absorbing Japanese companies, because Microsoft cannot do that. For people who are constantly out there like, Microsoft should buy Sega, they can't. That's illegal. Japan would never allow it. They tried because they were just like throwing it out there flippantly. It's not a real thing. Like, you can't. Japanese law is essential. I'm no expert on this, but I do know that Japanese law, just like the FTC has to review the Activision acquisition, the Japanese government has to do exactly the same thing anytime there's a similar situation. However, their laws are a little bit more strict on it. Straight up, a non-Japanese corporation cannot buy a Japanese corporation. That will be blocked 100 out of 100 times. And
that probably explains the story that when Microsoft people are saying, yeah, we made an offer to Nintendo to buy them, like way back when we were starting to Xbox, and they just laughed at us. That probably explains it.
Yeah, because they knew so little about that market. I mean, the Xbox itself proves that. they didn't cut that deal with Sega, because Sega could have actually helped them out in Japan with the original Xbox. And when the 360 was gaining traction, they famously didn't understand the market. So they were like, you can't have all these like weird hentai anime games. Stop that. Put on Call of Duty. It's like, well, then you killed it because you just don't understand that market. So they clearly just don't get it over there. And to their credit now, they seem to understand that they don't get it. But Sony could theoretically go around absorbing Konami, Capcom. Hell, they could actually get Sega. That is not impossible.
I think Konami is the one that makes the most sense.
Konami is the lowest hanging of the fruit. Like it's right there.
And its franchises: Castlevania, Silent
Hill,
Metal Gear. These are franchises that are tied to Sony.
Yeah, they are. And the best part about that move in particular is Sony has a good relationship with Hideo Kojima. Bring him back and do proper Metal Gear. Just basically kick out all of the people from Konami and just say, we own your IP.
I mean, Konami barely makes games anymore, so it's not even like that's difficult.
It's similar to the Activision Blizzard acquisition, where Activision Blizzard, because of their corporate scandals, were basically low-hanging fruit, and they were at their absolute lowest value. So Microsoft picked them up at the perfect time, and is just going to fucking kick like douchebags like Bobby Kotick or whatever his name is, Bobby Kotick, or
they'll get purged, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Like, bye, Felicia. It's like, give me your fucking game studio. Yeah.
It's so here's the thing. I'm not sitting here saying I want Sony to go and buy Konami and all that, but like, I wouldn't be surprised if that's in play now, because that's like the biggest advantage Sony has over Microsoft is they are actually capable of absorbing Japanese corporations. And the truth is, as you point out, Konami's got a bunch of great legacy IPs that Sony could really use. And unlike Microsoft, who's totally into the like, we'll put everything on everything mentality, Sony is not.
No.
They are very much an old school mentality of like,
they've just started putting some of their games on PC.
They just started doing that. They actually just put a game on the Switch. I don't remember what it was. Yeah, I don't remember what it was, but this like just happened. At the time I'm recording this, like this happened like a week ago. Yeah. I just don't remember what the name of it is.
And they did just put the MLB The Show game.
Well, they had no choice. That MLB forced them to do that.
Yeah.
But basically, yeah, they're not super willing. They typically only do it if they have to. In the case of the PC ones, it just looked like, all right, we made our money, let's make some more. Yeah, that was all that was. I don't remember what the deal with the Nintendo Switch one was. But like I said, this only happened like a week ago at the time we're recording this. But I would not be at all surprised if they make a move for Konami. Capcom is also a good one. It's not as easy. It would have been a few years ago. I mean, Capcom was basically worthless a few years ago. I'm really stunned nobody did it. But I guess Sony doesn't have that same mentality of we should just buy up everything. Sega is technically possible, but that would be a big one to do.
Yeah, I mean, Sega's making money. I mean, I don't see.
Yeah, Sega's doing fine, but it also, I mean, maybe it says something about the two cultures. Like, Americans are very willing to just be like, yes, I built this company from the ground up. Oh, here's a paycheck? Yeah, screw it, take it, I don't care. Whereas the Japanese, there's a bigger pride factor in that, where they're like, my father started it, and his father, and so it's like, they're built differently, so that's why you don't hear about that as much. But again, I could see Sony at least swinging for the fences on that, and Nintendo will just continue to sit there and do what they do.
Honestly, if Sony would go ahead and buy Konami, I honestly really would not care or even be worried about it at this point, because, I mean, other than, like, a pro soccer game or something that they just, like, do a roster update for every year, they don't make video games anymore. They just make pachinko machines at this point. So it's like, it's not even really... Yeah, they'll get some IPs and stuff, but it's not like the consolidation like Microsoft buying Activision is, really, because Konami basically left the industry.
But does Sony realistically have the capital to buy one of these they're one of these developers? I don't know if they do. I mean,
that's an interesting point, because Bungie wasn't that big.
Bungie wasn't that big, but you're getting passive revenue from microtransactions, and the freemium game model that Destiny provides.
Basically, basically you're buying something that's already generating revenue. You buy this is actually the same problem, interestingly, that you point this out. So we were talking about Star Wars and we were talking about the Fox merger and all that sort of stuff with the movies. So one of the big things Disney had going for it when they inherited Marvel specifically, they inherited a whole bunch of projects in active development. When they inherited Fox, they inherited a whole bunch of projects in active development. And all that basically means is these are prepaid projects that Fox, or in that case Paramount or whoever had them at the time, they had already paid for it, and now you're just going to get to complete it and generate revenue immediately. The problem they had with Star Wars is that it had absolutely nothing in active development. And as a result, it has, I mean, it's probably made money by now, but it took a really long time for them to generate profit in the Star Wars division, because in addition to buying it, you had to also pay to create all of these projects from literally nothing. That is the problem with Konami, is that if you were to buy it, aside from some pachinko revenue, you have to just be like, okay, now how do we clean all this up? We have to now pay to create a Castlevania game and everything that goes with it. We have to pay to create a new Silent Hill game and everything that goes with it. Like, you aren't just paying like whatever, let's just say $4 billion or whatever it was. You're now paying like $10 billion in just creating stuff too. Do you see the problem?
Yeah. So unless if Sony like goes to like Kojima and is like, hey, you want to make another Metal? We're thinking of maybe buying Konami. Would you want to make another Metal Gear or something?
That's like a conversation. You still have to pay that process.
Well, yeah, they still have to pay for it, but unless if they have a solid plan beforehand to actually go and do that, it wouldn't make sense for them to buy Konami.
Yeah. Yes, but that's what I'm saying to Rob's point about buying Bungie. The smartest thing is you're buying a company that will immediately turn around and start generating revenue, and now you can do more with it on top of that. That's key in such short-term. It's kind of a short-term business move, even though it's permanent. You're looking for short-term instant revenue and adding to your portfolio at the same time.
Yeah,
basically, if you buy Konami, you're also buying their problems.
True. Yeah. I did read somewhere that like most of the cost of actually buying Bungie went to basically giving the employees like sign-on bonuses or whatever to make sure they didn't leave.
Yeah.
After the merger.
And you know why? Because they need them around to get that instant revenue. That's why.
By the way, in case you guys are curious, I kind of I looked it up just because I was wondering what is the revenue from annually from Call of Duty and Candy Crush in the past fiscal year? So like 2021. How much revenue did just these two games generate for Activision Blizzard? Call of Duty, 4 million. I'm sorry, 4 billion in 1 year.
That's a pretty big difference.
4 billion in the 2021 year. Candy Crush, 1.2 billion.
Now is that you said revenue? That's not profit.
Yeah, but these games are free.
Intake. Yeah.
But these games are free.
So that's all just microtransactions.
That's microtransactions.
But again, Microsoft knew that those are instant revenue streams. Basically, rather than buying the broken down old car, you're buying the car that's literally in motion while you get it. They just throw the driver out and you take the seat and keep driving the car. That's basically how that's working.
But it's that's the difference between $70 billion and what was Bungie? What was it, 13?
It was like a little over. It was like 3.
Yeah, $3 billion. That's the difference of $65 billion. You know.
Anything else to say on this? Because otherwise, we're just going to keep going for like an hour if we keep.
Yeah, I know. I'm pretty tapped.
Yeah, same here.
Okay, then. Well, thank you, Joseph, for that subject. The next subject here, which comes from Chuck Shaw, who is also a Patreon backer. He gets to pick a subject, and I'm just going to warn everybody. I tried to talk him out of this subject, but he was very insistent that we talk about this. Get ready. He wanted to talk about our favorite Olympics games, and I was like, I don't know if I have one, dude. I think my response was, does Space Jam count? And the answer was no. So, I mean, he wanted to talk about it because the Olympics are going on right now. At least the time we're recording this, the Winter Olympics are going on. The more boring of the two Olympics, in my opinion. I actually feel like the Winter Olympics exist because they like people like hockey, but they had to come up with a whole bunch of other sports to just put around it so that there could be an Olympics. I don't know. Like, I honestly, I'm not really a sports game guy, and I don't think either of you guys are either. I mean, Rob, you seem like you might be slightly more, but
I like baseball. That's about it.
Yeah. So like, I mean, I guess the best thing that happened to Olympics games in the last few years was that Sega started making those like Sonic Mario crossover ones. But even then, it was like, so wait a minute. Everybody's wanted these two characters together in some sort of like crazy big game. And aside from Sonic's cameos in Smash, all we've ever really gotten is those damn Olympics games. And that's the most positive thing I can say about Olympics games.
I mean, the only Olympics game I played was like the Snoopy Olympic Games game on the NES when I was a kid.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
I know that the 96 Olympics, the ones that were in Atlanta, there was a bunch of games around that. Actually, this is not even a game itself, but it's just an interesting point. So I was hanging out with this guy named Kay, who's like this. He is to the Sega Saturn what I am to the Dreamcast. He just has like everything to the point of it being insane. So I was at his house, and he was showing me weird stuff. And this thing he showed me was this disc that's like an unreleased Sega Saturn game from Japan that has cover art for a 96 Olympics game from Atlanta. Not the one that actually came out, but like a completely different game. There's no information on it whatsoever. And he's telling me about it. I'm like, wait, so you have like this unreleased game? He's like, no. He's like, that disc makes no sense. You put it into a computer or anything, it's a music CD for some totally unrelated Japanese singer. And we have no idea where the real game is or what the deal is, but that is the only known like disc of that. And it's yeah, I know. It's kind of cool, right? But it's like, for some reason, the label on it is like this unreleased Sega Saturn, like 96 Olympics game. But as far as like actual Olympics games, man, like I know that Olympic soccer for the Saturn is in the North American version is like oddly enough, it's like one of the rarest Saturn games that you would never expect to be rare because it's just like a sports game. Not necessarily valuable, but just one of those games that's like annoyingly hard to find. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can, if you do find it, it's usually not that bad. It's just that it's not like Panzer Dragoon Saga, but it's like one of those things. You'll see Panzer Dragoon Saga, you won't want to pay for it, but you'll find it. But like Olympic soccer for the Saturn, you'll almost never find it. It's just that if you do, it's probably like $40. And I remember I think I remember having like a really hard time getting it for that reason. But like, that probably tells you something about our Olympics games knowledge, that it's all like obscure facts, but not like how any of the games actually play.
Yeah.
I actually have an answer to this question.
Okay. All right. Go for it. Because Space Jam didn't count. That much I know.
So this has definitely got to count. And if it doesn't, fuck you, it's counting. So my favorite Olympic sport game is QWOP.
The keyboard thing?
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
Where you're a 100-meter like runner, and you have to you use the W, Q, O, and P keys on your keyboard to control the movement of the runner's legs. But like the Q and W do the thighs, and then the O and P do the calves. And it's like a ragdoll game. But
you just fall over like immediately.
It's basically just like, how difficult is it as a human to like control all of your muscles just to fucking walk? Basically, this is like the idea. But the game is stupidly fucking impossible to play. I think it's one of the most popular like browser games ever. Like, I know they released it on iPhone and I think Android too. But
it feels like a very like it wasn't around in that era, but it feels like a game you would have played on Newgrounds. Like when that was really popular, it feels exactly like that. Like, whereas it's just a game that's meant to be totally impossible, but for some reason you're playing it.
Yeah. So I mean, it has 30 million hits on its website. So. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of gluttons for punishment in the world.
It's a little bit like Happy Wheels, but just about the one character instead of like the entire like trying to get the character through a park. It's just you're just trying to make the character walk, and it's like as dangerous.
Yeah. So that is my favorite Olympics game is QWOP.
You know what? I'm gonna go with you. Let's go with QWOP. That's the best Olympics game ever made. Cost a guy 10 cents to produce.
Yeah, basically.
Just from hearing about it,
go play it. You could play it. I was playing it right now while you guys were talking about your Olympics games. Like I was playing QWOP. I got 23 meters.
That's pretty good.
And then I've played a lot of QWOP back in my day.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. You're a
QWOP first
veteran.
time I've ever heard of it, but
yeah.
Well, do you have a different answer, Joseph, by chance?
No, like I said, the only Olympics game I ever played was that Snoopy one on the NES, which might not have even been an official Olympics game either. But...
All right, so we'll go with 1 vote for Snoopy, 2 votes for QWOP. So, and there you go, everybody. Go
There's
play
the consensus.
QWOP.
QWOP is the greatest Olympics game ever.
It's not the greatest until it's on Game Pass. Maybe Microsoft will buy QWOP.
Phil Spencer, come on. Phil Spencer.
Phil, come on. That's an
QWOP.
easy one. That's like a $2 billion merger. That's like nothing. As you find that in Microsoft's couches. Get that done, son. Sorry, Chuck, that this wasn't more elaborate. Sorry, Chuck. That's all I can think to say about this. All right, well, thank you, Chuck. I hope that wasn't too disappointing to you, but thank you very much for the subject. Joseph, thank you for your subject as well and joining us, as always.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, this is post-production Adam here. The next section is going to be a little wonky at first because Keith, who will be joining us here in a second, as well as Rob, for whatever reason, their audio just didn't record for like the first 5 minutes. Only mine did, so I've tried to cut around it a little bit and just kind of make it flow as best I can, but yeah, when I kind of talk and no one responds for a second, that's why. Keith very specifically had the subject. He wanted to talk about, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but you wanted to talk about good movies versus guilty pleasures. And the idea there is basically a good movie is like something that can win like an Academy Award. It can win a Best Picture, like whatever. Like Schindler's List is a good film. It won multiple Academy Awards, very well respected, very well crafted, all that sort of stuff. A guilty pleasure would be like an Independence Day, like a stupid movie that you just love because you just love it. I guess the way you would define film in the way you're using it, not in the literal term, but in the term he's using it. A movie it can be anything. I mean, it can be just like, hey, we technically put a bunch of stuff together and we're calling it a movie. Like Best of the Worst, Red Letter Media, they cover this to no end, which is just like, look at all these crappy B movies and things that exist. A film, the way you put it in that context, is again something that can win an Academy Award for high quality and standards, but they're usually not the most appealing things like in terms of box office and popularity. So that's why you typically get around to the Oscars and you find that the movie won, or all the ones that are nominated, are movies you've never heard of. The Oscars are having a big problem with that because you're trying to make an entire awards show dedicated to something that's becoming increasingly niche because less and less people are watching the movies that are being nominated. And so every year there's like pressure for them to nominate like there was pressure for them to nominate Avengers Endgame for Best Picture. Stuff like that, because they're like, well, everybody saw it. It's like, I kind of respect them for, I'm not going to call it keeping it pure, but they are at least kind of trying to put focus on, as he puts it, films and not movies, which is very difficult to do when your ratings would be like way higher if all you did was put up like the 10 blockbuster movies of the year. So you got to give them some credibility for that, despite all the other flaws that exist with the Academy Awards. And we're not, like I said, that's not the subject, but yes.
But I mean, with just kind of briefly with that, it's similar to kind of how we were talking about the previous subject with Joseph, like when we were kind of talking about the video game industry and kind of the games that are produced nowadays. I think Hollywood is running into the very similar problem as the video game industry, in that as a consumer of this type of media, you are presented every year with really just two types of enjoyment. You get small kind of like indie things, like stuff that wins Academy Awards, or you get like, you know, Netflix movies kind of like on the small screen, and then you get the hyper mega fucking triple A Avengers bullshit, and there's so little in between. As in, like, in the video game industry as well, you get all these AAA games, and, like, there's, like, 5 of them per console a year. And then everything else is indie games. Small, like, indie developers doing, like, 2D Metroidvanias or roguelites. So, I think the movie industry is in the same way. There's no, like, AA movies anymore. Do
you know what the last one was?
What?
Because it's famous for it. Deadpool.
Yeah. Kinda.
Deadpool had a $60 million budget, which in Hollywood is considered pretty small for what was going to be a big release. Yeah. And it ended up outgrossing like every other comic book movie, like in the entire like X-Men franchise. So it kind of gave a resurgence to the possibility that you could do that. But they basically learned all the wrong lessons from Deadpool, because that's what happens. But yes, you're 100% right. The mid-tier, like $40 to $80 million budget movie that goes on to make a quote-unquote modest, like $400 million, that doesn't really exist anymore. Yeah. They basically, like, Marvel bets on all their movies to, like, become billion-dollar movies, and if they don't, they're considered, like, failures. Yeah. But then the alternative is, like, the indie movie scene where their budget's, like, $20,000. So it's like there isn't a whole lot of in-between. You do get the weird thing that's happening now with the Oscars specifically, and this is funny that we're doing this because I just looked this up. The time we're recording this, the 2022 Academy Awards have not been announced as to like what's even nominated, but they're getting announced in 2 days from now. So let's all play a game and see, you out there listening, if you've heard of any of those movies on the list, because we don't know what they are either. But anyway, those movies are usually the ones that are crafted kind of for the purpose of trying to win an Oscar, as opposed to like legitimately nominating a movie that was good and just existed anyway. It's like they're specifically crafting them for that show now. It's very bizarre the way it's all kind of split in different directions. But yeah, that doesn't really matter. Do you wanted to talk about like do you want us to start making some examples, Keith?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so why don't you kick this off?
In particular, you can go with your personal ones. When it comes to my film of choice, it's actually Amadeus is my choice film.
Such a good movie.
Give us free, man.
If you do not know, Amadeus is the story of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, told through the eyes of his supposed rival, Salieri. Not only is to have amazing music, is the acting performances are just mind-blowing.
So, I'm sorry, because I thought you said Amistad, so I quoted a line from it.
Oh, God.
So that's why I randomly said, give us free. I thought you were talking about Amistad. Sorry. My bad.
A better response would have been, or,
yeah,
there it is.
No, the best response is, did you see the sequel? It's called Last Action Hero. Did you see Last Action Hero, the Schwarzenegger movie?
Man, I'll tell you one thing. That's how I knew he was the bad guy, man. He killed Mozart.
Yeah, that's exactly the line in the movie.
I love that.
They're like, of course he's the bad guy. He killed Mozart. Did you see Amadeus?
His name was John Practice. How do you get to Carnegie Hall?
That, by the way, I know that probably wasn't your answer, but that is a perfect good movies versus guilty pleasures. Is Amadeus versus Last Action Hero.
Not only
Last Action Hero is an amazingly stupid movie, but it is fun as hell.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I was saying Amadeus. Hopefully I said it correctly the first time.
No, you did. I just thought you said Amistad. That was my bad.
Not saying Amistad I want to bring up for a different reason, but but Amadeus is an amazing film, well shot and whatnot. And the opposite way around, my guilty pleasure movie is always 100% Masters of the Universe starring Dolph Lundgren.
Ooh.
All day, every freaking day. To the point where like it's my favorite movie. I watch it every year on my birthday. I can't help it. I can quote it all day, all night. I actually showed examples in a film acting class of Frank Langella's acting job in that because I loved it so much. God, it's such a damn good movie. I know I've talked about it before in this podcast, but man, at least check it out if you can't. I mean, it's much better than The Punisher, I'll tell you that much.
So I'm going to answer that. So good movies, you try to define a film that completely functions on itself, independent of any sort of sequel. And that actually kind of makes it a little more complicated because if you ask me, until you got to the Disney era, Star Wars was all one film. So I can't say like, oh, Episode 4 is like my favorite movie ever made or whatever. Like, because I'm too aware of the context around it, from the prequels and the sequels. So I have to eliminate that. Even for other ones that I genuinely love, like I think Back to the Future 1 is one of the greatest films ever made, but I can't include it just because it does in fact have sequels. So when you get, that's just my stance on it. But a movie
that's actually good point about the first in a trilogy.
Yeah, but that in that case, an unintended trilogy, but a trilogy nonetheless. So when you apply that sort of filter to it, my favorite standalone movie ever produced that I would call a film, as we've been defining it, is Downfall, which is best known on the internet before the meme. It's best known as the meme for like Hitler just found out something and he's raging about something stupid. Like it infamously started when he found out his Xbox 360 got the red rings of death. Like that was actually how that started. But that actual movie where that scene is from is to me the greatest like standalone, not tied to anything. I mean, obviously it's got history around it. It's from World War II or whatever. But like it doesn't have a sequel where like Hitler came back. It doesn't have the
Iron Sky, man. Iron Sky is the sequel.
He's on the moon, man.
That's the guilty pleasure.
That's the guilty pleasure version. But Downfall actually won. It actually did win an Oscar. It won Best Foreign Film 2004.
Should have won Best. Absolutely should have.
Back then, foreign films were not eligible for Best Picture.
Yeah,
that's why they created that genre in general. I think the first one that did it was that Korean film from like 2 years ago or whatever it was, the one that won Best Picture.
Oh shit, yeah.
Remember this?
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. But that proves the point. Like, we're film guys and we still don't even remember the name of it, which is bad. But anyway, so yes, that would be my answer for the good movie. Guilty pleasure, and I already said it, is Independence Day. Ooh. I can watch that. You put that on any time, I can watch that. Even though I've dissected it a million times, I know why it's stupid. It's very, very dumb, but it takes itself seriously, which is hilarious because it really shouldn't, but it does. Unlike the sequel, which is just a bad film, it's not even watchable. Independence Day is like a perfect storm of incompetently competent. I don't know how else to put it. I love it. I can watch that anytime, any day. It's like listening to a song that you love for like 2 hours. I don't know how else to put it.
Dude, no,
absolutely, man.
I totally agree. So like Independence Day. So like as a history teacher, right? I do this like lesson where I'm talking about like the great American presidential speeches, and I go through like Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, and we have nothing to fear but fear itself, and we choose to go to the moon in the end of the decade and do the other thing.
Kennedy,
so like do all these things, and then I'm like, well, and of course we all know like the greatest presidential speech is like the one given like before the assault on the
Whitmore.
Whitmore's
President Whitmore before the Battle of Area 51.
We will say as one voice, we will not go quietly into that dark night.
We will not go down without a fight.
I know that whole speech.
I know. It's like, and like everybody fighting. They're like, yeah, that's totally the best presidential speech of all time.
Dean Devlin actually claims he wrote that like right before they filmed it, because they were like, we don't have enough for him to get everything going. So like, I don't know. He just wrote something, and then they did it in like 2 takes, and that was it. He didn't expect it to become like what it became. I don't necessarily believe Dean Devlin because he's not a very good filmmaker, but like it doesn't matter. Or producer.
There's
in this
actually
case.
a point to make with that speech that also the score actually plays very.
It does, yes.
That one as well.
Yeah, and then it's got the greatest extra in film history, that like really overly energized like
the salute
pilot who's just like, yeah.
Oh yeah, the dude with the sunglasses.
The salute pilot. Yeah. Yeah, not the guy with the sunglasses. There's this guy who has this like crazy close up, who's just like way too enthusiastic in his salute. But it doesn't matter.
Oh yeah, no. But
anyway,
that's the actual soldier. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, I love that movie, and this is a side thing. I do love that when that movie came out in '96, Bill Pullman actually was the host of SNL. And the opening sketch to promote that movie was, because that was also an election year when Clinton ran against Dole. So they had the late Norm Macdonald playing Dole, as he always did. But instead of doing a debate against Clinton, he was doing a debate against President Whitmore, who was trying to get a second term after the events of Independence Day. And he's just like, under my administration, we wiped out the alien menace and the average American, this, that, and the other. And then Norm Macdonald's like, under your administration, they incinerated the average American. Like, it's an amazing sketch of, like, how could you vote for this guy? Like, the entire world was destroyed under him. He made the decision to have everyone stay in the cities where the aliens were. Like, everybody died on his watch.
Oh, my God.
Like, because, again, Independence Day, really stupid movie. I love it to no end. I mean, technically, yeah, it has a sequel, but that sequel is essentially unwatchable.
Yeah.
That sequel lost me. Like, I waited 20 years for that sequel. It lost me in the first 20 seconds when the aliens find out about, like, they're the master, like, the home base or whatever, finds out about the, shall we say, the Earth colony getting destroyed because they watched Bill Pullman's speech on YouTube, or whatever it was. And you're like, that's it? You find that out in the first, like, 20 seconds. I'm like, oh my God, this movie lost me 20 seconds in.
Honestly, I never even watched it because, like, when they didn't bring back Will Smith, they killed off his character off screen. I'm just like,
oh yeah.
So if you're not getting Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum together, it's like, why am I going to see this movie? Yeah.
I know this is not a review of that movie. That movie is like 20% smart. Like, there's some legitimately good, like, quote unquote Independence Day lore in it that is interesting. Mm-hmm. But then the rest of it is like, they just got people on cocaine to write.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what they were thinking. And it like, I remember watching that, you know, with my mom once, because she loved the original Independence Day. And we were sitting there watching the sequel. I had already seen it, and I knew it was bad, and I had warned her. And we were maybe halfway through it, and she's just sitting there, like, facepalming. She's like, how much longer is this? Because, like, it's really that bad. It is really bad. And not in an entertaining bad. See, that's another subcategory, by the way, is, like, it's not even guilty pleasures. Guilty pleasure, like Independence Day, you can see why some people liked it because they took it seriously, and you can see why some people liked it because they didn't take it seriously.
Oh, yeah.
But then there's like quote unquote so bad it's good, and that of course the definitive example of that would be Tommy Wiseau's The Room. Yes, exactly.
Yep.
So these are different. I mean, film is obviously, as you said, subjective, so that you can create all sorts of subgenres, but we're going to try and keep it to just these two. But essentially our parameters to define that. Good movie is a movie that could potentially, or has, won an Academy Award. It's considered a legitimate film. It could be something that's maybe submitted to, like, the Library of Congress and the archives because it's part of historical preservation. Back to the Future and Star Wars, that happened to both of them. Guilty pleasures would be like, you know, dumb movies that you love even though they're bad. But the third category, like we said, is really just movies that are so bad they come all the way around to good. And that's uniquely hard to do. But that's a different subject.
Speaking of that, actually, have you guys seen Cabin Boy?
The one with the guy from Snow Days, Chris Elliott?
Yes.
I think I saw it once in the 90s, but I don't remember it.
I actually went to theaters with my my grandmother. Loved to take us to the movies. She loved films and stuff like that. And that movie, plus her hatred of Jim Carrey at the time, she walked out of very, very, very angrily, like saying she wanted her money back. That type of thing. Right. And so all my life, Cabin Boy to me has been a guilty pleasure only because if my grandma found out about it, she'd be really angry. And honestly, I get some chuckles out of that movie. That movie's got some good laughs, but the humor is almost 20 years too early, I must say.
No.
Like
I don't remember it.
Honestly, I say check it out. It's not for everybody. You definitely got to be ready for it, that's for sure. But it definitely fits that list for sure. I'm kind of curious about Rob's.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Rob, did you give us your two?
No.
Yeah.
So, like, to Adam's point, it's like, there are absolutely, like, bad guilty pleasure movies have kind of crossed into, like, the realm nowadays of being, like, examined in film school as, like, like I'm sure like film students today watch things like The Room or Rocky Horror Picture Show or Plan 9 from Outer Space. Fucking Plan 9 from Outer Space is in the Library of Congress. Like
That's an interesting point.
Like it's the so bad, it's so catastrophically bad that is literally transcendent piece of art. That's would be like those things where they've transformed from a cult movie into movies that people make movies about. They've made movies about The Room. They've made movies about Plan 9 from Outer Space. Ed Wood famously. So those are like that is the transcendent crap. Transcendently weird or off key films. But throwing back to like our Oscar bait film discussion earlier, I have actually only seen one, I would say recent Oscar bait film in theaters, and it was back in, I want to say like 2013, 2014. I went to go see at the Paris Theater, which is an amazing like theater, single screen theater in Manhattan, where they film mostly like French art film, like independent films, or that's what they kind of put there, French language films. But they ended up doing a limited release of The Artist in I think 2013, 2014, which was that Oscar like Best Picture winner. It was a silent film, and it was like the first silent film to ever like win an Oscar in however many years. Because I mean, Adam, were the Academy Awards around during like the silent film era, or do you know that? Or
it started in 1929.
So I guess like maybe right on the cusp, I guess, of like silent films. So yeah,
at least I think it was 29.
Yeah,
I think it was either 28 or 29.
Yeah, so the Artist.
No, it was 29 because Wings was the first movie to ever win Best Picture.
Okay,
and the movie sucks.
Yeah, so the The Artist is a silent film made in a vaudeville style in the early 2010s, and that's like the only one I've actually ever seen in the movies, because like these films are so rarely in like your local AMC theater. But in terms of like guilty pleasure movies that I really like, my first instinct was actually to say Rocky Horror Picture Show, because I love that movie. I've seen it in theaters many times, and I love the soundtrack. The soundtrack slaps. Rest in peace, Meatloaf. But that's a transcendently bad movie. It's a film that's never left theaters. It's like it's like The Room. It's like Plan 9 from Outer Space. But so like bad movies that I would say like I watch fairly regularly are the Showa era Godzilla films that are like
no. I'm laughing because when you talked about the last Academy Award winner that you saw, I started to think about what was the last one I saw in theaters, and hilariously, it was Shin Godzilla.
Shin Godzilla won a Best Picture. I know it won Best Picture in Japan. Right, it did. Japan. I wanted to see that in theaters so bad. They did a limited showing
Chicago
in the city.
was one of like the... Yeah, Chicago was like one of the 6 cities where they were playing.
They did it in New York too, and
I
couldn't get a ticket for it. It sold out. I was heartbroken.
That's first of all, we live in all the obvious cities. That's going to be your New York, your Chicago, your Los Angeles, your San Francisco, probably DC. Like that makes sense.
But
anyway, go on. Sorry.
So yeah, like those Showa era.
The Showa era,
where like I objectively like the Heisei series better. I think the movies are like I like those. Like that's like Return of Godzilla, like 1984, to Godzilla versus Destoroyah. And what was that, 1995 or whatever. Those are my favorite Godzilla movies, save for the Shin Godzilla and the Gojira, the original 1954 Japanese film. I think that's a fucking masterpiece.
You know what? It's interesting. I'm sorry. I'm going to let you finish. Sorry, I have a point that I think you brought up, and that's great. Go ahead.
So yeah, those Showa movies like The Son of Godzilla and Godzilla versus like the sea monster, like Ebirah, Horror of the Deep. fucking Jet Jaguar, fucking King Caesar, fucking like I have the soundtrack of the Akira Ifukube's like scores for those films on my iPod. I listen to them religiously. I adore those movies. I have the Criterion Collection Blu-ray set, which is like I fucking love. I think it's like the best Criterion release they've ever done.
I agree with that.
So like those are the films that, like, because there are a few objectively good films in there, like Gojira being one of them. Like you say something about like Godzilla vs. Mothra, or like
the two best films in there are Gojira and Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla.
Yeah, Mechagodzilla, the first one with the
somehow the Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla is probably the second best of that whole era, and debatably like top 5 all-time Godzilla movies. And it shouldn't be, but it is.
Yeah. So like I there are a couple movies, but on the whole, like that like era of Godzilla movies is so bad. There's a reason that Mystery Science Theater did a number of those. Yeah.
Well, they basically created like Godzilla as a meme, like because they were the ones who did Godzilla vs. Megalon, and that's really what kind of jump started a reboot of Godzilla in general, actually. But that's a separate thing. No, you know what? I'm really glad you brought up Godzilla that way, because Godzilla can teach you every type of movie in one franchise. Gojira in 1954 is legitimately like an Oscar-winning, or should have been. I think it won various awards. It is legitimate. You could say that is like the best film of 1954, and possibly one of the best movies of the 1950s in general.
Just the effects alone, man.
Like, it's an amazing piece of film.
It's still
standing by itself.
Terrifying. Like, you know,
it still holds up. Sure, the visual effects don't step like, you know, they don't work as well as what we're used to now. But it's like, if you can just kind of detach from that, the narrative of it is very, very competent. And there's a reason that every time they try to reboot that series, they basically try to follow that one. And every sequel is like, well, okay, we're eliminating everything except for that movie. Like, it's why that's usually the case. You can also have, guilty pleasures. Dude, I'm just going to say it. Godzilla 98 by Roland Emmerich, again, Independence Day, man. That is a guilty pleasure movie. That movie sucks. It sucks. But it is a terrible Godzilla movie. But if you can just detach the name, it's actually a surprisingly entertaining film because it's so persistently stupid. But then mixes it.
Here's what I will say about Godzilla 98. I like everything in that movie until you see Godzilla come out of the water in New York.
Yeah, it's a Godzilla movie up to that point.
I loved kind of like the building of the lore, like the atomic like blasts in French Polynesia, and them interviewing like the sailors and like showing them the flame, and he's like Gojira. I'm like
the subtle attack. And all that,
I'm like okay, I'm invested in this, and then the rest of the movie is like, oh, it's just Jurassic Park.
It gets it's Jurassic Park in Manhattan. And it gets dumber and dumber and dumber as it goes. But it's still it's entertaining for like all the wrong reasons.
Yes.
Like, that's a lot of fish. You're like, I don't know how to react to that, so I'm just gonna
laugh.
That's
the first thing I thought of when you said that movie.
It's Gojira, you morons! Like, it's like when they say it's Godzilla.
And I'm not even. I talked about this on my last live stream. There's a song in that towards the end of the film, like the one where they actually shoot at Godzilla or whatever, Zilla, when he's on the Brooklyn Bridge. I'm like, I listened to that piece of music.
It's not.
Ironically, for entertainment.
It's not the Puff Daddy song, is it?
Yeah, no. It's like it's part of the score.
Oh,
it's like the background
the Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, because they took Puff Daddy took like Kashmir by Led Zeppelin, one of the best rock songs ever.
I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about background score music. That doesn't matter. But yeah, that is a great guilty pleasure. But then you look through the rest of that franchise. Again, you got Shin Godzilla that wins Best Picture.
Yep.
And then you have things like the other American, like Godzilla 2014 is an interesting one because you might actually go so far as to call it a good movie. It is crafted very well.
Yeah.
It's just not that engaging. But whereas Godzilla 98, I actually have more fun watching it because of all the wrong reasons. But then you look at the entire like legacy content, as we're talking the Showa, the Heisei, like the Heisei era as a someone who's willing to get into Godzilla is entertaining as hell because I understand what I'm seeing. I'm going to see giant costume men and robots fighting and stuff, and it's stupid, But it's a movie that like you couldn't really show to anybody unless they have similar interests. Like you couldn't bring a date to that unless you knew they were cool with it. You couldn't watch that with other people and be like, guys, you have to watch this. This is like a really good movie. Like they have to actually have similar tastes. But if you look at other eras, like you could actually legitimately show Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla and be like, this is going to surprise you, like how well this is crafted. But then it also has the extreme other end of like unwatchable, like Godzilla's Revenge, which is like the clip show movie.
Yeah. Oh fuck.
Like it has every type of definition of good, bad, guilty pleasure, so bad it's good, so like good that it might debatably be bad, which might be the way I would describe Godzilla 2014. It's like so perfectly crafted that it's boring.
Hashtag justice for Gabara.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
But you know what's funny though about like specifically Godzilla's Revenge? I don't know why. I you know what? It must have been. I mean, Keith, did you watch Godzilla movies as like a kid?
Yeah, I mainly got him from my dad at his old 8 VHS collection off of TV.
Yeah, well, so that's how, like, to that point, that's how I really discovered these films. Like, and I think, Adam, you could probably testify to this. Like, getting the TV guide and, like, scanning through, like, the Sci-Fi Channel or whatever, or, like, the standard, like, broadcast channels, like, for the week and seeing, like, hoping to see, like, Godzilla listed, and then, like, having to, like, put in your fucking hook up your VCR and, like, and get a rip of the broadcast. That's how I watched those movies. Like, it wasn't until, like, I found my local Tower Video and got a Laserdisc player that I actually started seeing some of these, like, actual retail releases of these movies. So, but the ones that I would that I had, like, I would watch religiously. I would, like, watch over and over and over again because I was obsessed with Godzilla. And one of the ones that I had that I taped off fucking TV was Godzilla's Revenge. And, like, the kid being kidnapped and, like, having to fend off, like, his bullies and shit. I'm like, this movie fucking sucks. But I might have...
a terrible film.
But I might have seen this movie more times than I've seen Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. Because I probably watched it, like, 50 fucking times as a kid, wearing out this VHS...
Yep.
A copy that I ripped off of Sci-Fi Channel in 1994. So it's fun. It's funny how, like, I could probably recite that entire fucking movie, like, scene by scene, like even now, because I've seen it so many times. Like, and that's like a definition of, like, a bad movie that sticks with you because it gets at you at a formative age in your development, and it sticks with you, like Independence Day. Like, where I think if you had seen that movie, maybe if that movie had come out in a vacuum in 2022, like, you'd probably be like, this movie fucking sucks. Like, this is so bad. But because you saw it when you were a kid and it was part of, like, that cultural zeitgeist of, like, the 90s, where Will Smith is punching aliens and Dennis Quaid is fucking saving or is it Randy Quaid? Randy Quaid is saving the fucking world in a biplane. It's like, this is like, this is the...
That was the deleted version. Version.
Yeah. But it's, but, like, this is like, it wouldn't fly nowadays. It would either be just, like, this high fucking comedy joke film, or it would just, like, be something that you would see, like, on the Sci-Fi Channel, like Sharknado, it couldn't exist nowadays. Yeah. Case in point, Independence Day, was that Resurrection, or what was the sequel?
Regurgitation.
It's like,
it was awful.
Case in point, they tried to replicate, they tried to reheat Souffle, and they could not reheat it.
Trust me when I say, if you actually watch the second one, you'll be like, how did this come from that? Because it just doesn't work. But that's a different discussion.
It doesn't make any sense at all.
But yeah, that doesn't fall in any of these categories other than just really bad. That's the only place you can put that. It's like the worst. It's boring and offensively bad. But to Godzilla's Revenge, though, You're right, because that was the one that we treated like The Room. Like, some of my buddies, we would get together and watch this ridiculous movie of this kid who's like humping cars and all the other stupid stuff that he does in that movie. And you're just like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And then like the monster scenes, like you get to the, you know, Godzilla's island or whatever, and like Manila's talking, and you're like, what? Like,
Godzilla's teaching me to be strong.
And he talks like a complete idiot. Godzilla says I need to get bigger. And you're like, why do you talk like that? Like, it's just unbelievable. And he just changes his size at will. He has the power to do anything. But when he gets tall, he's too dumb to talk. It doesn't make any sense. Like, everything about it is confusing. Anyway, I will point this out because you said something that I'm very, because you've seen it a million times, you know that movie backwards and forwards. The last time I saw it, I was doing a little bit of a Godzilla marathon, so when I got to that movie, I was like, ugh, because watching that movie by yourself is not the same experience.
You need to get stoned with friends and watch it. Yeah,
it pretty much put the franchise in the grave, and then they realized they were coming up to a big
it was 69. Yeah.
Yes, that's the only reason they did
Destroy
Godzilla
All
vs. Mechagodzilla.
Yeah.
No, Destroy All Monsters happened first. This was after Destroy All Monsters because they were like, look, you know, Destroy All Monsters made a bunch of money. Let's put another Godzilla movie out. Well, we'll just use footage from the old movies. Who cares?
Yeah.
That's how that movie came to exist.
Like The Matrix, yeah.
So I'm pretty sure that movie came out in like 69 or 70.
Look, you know what? I have to ask you this, Adam, because I don't know if anybody would have the answer. Like, because I haven't seen the movie in a while. I'm trying to remember.
I get it. I'm your source for all things related to Godzilla's Revenge.
Okay, so
Godzilla's Revenge specifically. Yes.
Gabara, right? Like the bully monster.
Or Gabara, yes, of course, with his crappy little lightning power.
Yes. Was he? Did he make a cameo in? What was the Godzilla movie?
I think he was in Godzilla Final Wars.
Final Wars. Was he in Final Wars? Because he should have been in Final Wars. Because you have Minya in it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's in there as just like a random background character who gets like thrown real quick. The interesting thing about Godzilla Final Wars as far as the villains go is the director didn't watch the Heisei era movies. And as a result, every single villain he fights is Showa era.
Yeah, you didn't get like Destroyer or Biolante or whatever.
Yeah, there was no Heisei era stuff.
Was this wait, was this the one with Kumonga and stuff like that?
Yeah, Kumonga was the spider.
He's in there
spider.
technically.
Yeah.
Okay. Spider.
Although in the English dub in Son of Godzilla, the original one, he was called a Spiga, and then they changed his name to Kumonga in the newer dubs. Like, that's the other weird thing about that Criterion set. Like I said, all the dubs are like later redos, not the VHS ones that we grew up with. I don't really know why, but that's what they did.
That's what I was seeing. No. Is that the one that got switched?
No, Final Wars was the 2004 movie that kind of was supposed to end the franchise, and it did for a very long time. Like, that was a 10-year gap before the Americans took over and made Godzilla 2014.
I'm thinking about All Monsters Attack right now in my brain.
Oh, no, this is like right after that, I think.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's not connected. I mean, really, very few of those Millennium series movies are kind of connected.
Yeah.
But, like, Final Wars is, like, totally separate. Yeah.
Final Wars is it's like
fanfic, like just
basically fanfic the movie. The interesting thing about that though is that the only thing he fights in that movie that's not from the Showa era is Godzilla 98.
Is Zilla, yeah.
That's it. Yeah, and just called Zilla. And you know I didn't know this till recently. You know the model they use doesn't look anywhere near as good as the one that Sony actually had back in the real movie. No. And the reason for it is they didn't want to put that much money in, so they actually just bought an action figure of that character, and they just 3D scanned it. That's all they did. That's why it looks like so wonky.
Final Wars is another it's so bad it's good movie. It's like anybody who's a fan of Godzilla that hasn't seen it, I highly recommend. It's like one of the main characters is like some guy who looks like a cross between Mario and Joseph Stalin. And he fights people.
Yeah, he fights Don Fry.
Don Fry. He fights people with a katana or some shit. It's like so fucked. It's like this movie's so weird.
Watch that movie in the Japanese dub because he's an actual like MMA fighter, and they just hired him because he was just like this big bulky dude. But he does all his lines in English while everybody else talks in Japanese, and they don't understand each other, but they do. It doesn't make any sense. Like the funny thing, like I said, Godzilla is the perfect franchise to talk good movies versus guilty pleasures, because if you I have actually seen Godzilla fans who like hate that movie viscerally because they're like, Godzilla should be 1954 Godzilla.
Yeah.
It's like that movie is the polar opposite of Godzilla 1954. And so if you were to watch, if you have never seen a Godzilla movie, you've lived in a vacuum, you know nothing about the character, if you were to watch 1954 Godzilla, and then I'd say, okay, now put on Godzilla Final Wars, you'd be like, how the hell did you get from here to here?
Yeah.
Like, the two do not exist in the same
60
universe.
years of, like, progressively getting more drunk and more addicted to drugs. It's like, that's...
Yeah, it's the before and after shot of, like, a model who eventually got hooked on heroin. It's just, it's insane.
Yeah.
But it's a party.
Yeah, it is. No.
But, sorry, Keith, that we dominated so much of this with Godzilla. Let's bring it back around. You talk about some, like, but I'm telling you guys, Godzilla is the absolute perfect franchise to understand what every type of movie can be, from legitimate good movie to guilty pleasure to so bad it's good to just straight up terrible.
Yeah.
There's also some just duds in there where you're like, dude, this is just hard to sit through. It's just what it is.
Yeah. I've always been like a kind of fan of Godzilla, but unfortunately, Godzilla wasn't my main thing. I got pushed more into Power Rangers, and
Power Rangers is great.
That type of giant monster fighting. I really like the old, mostly Zoo Ranger, some of the old Japanese and stuff like that, because it really gives me the sense of the older style of Godzilla, but it was really more for me, more my style of show.
If you like Power Rangers, you would like Final Wars, because it's like absolutely Power Rangers meets Godzilla.
Okay, because I have not seen. I'm just looking up now. I have not seen that. Was that 2004 came out?
Yeah.
2004.
Final Wars.
It was supposed to be the
Wars.
50th anniversary celebration. Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about this, or any other like random good movies we should suggest to people? Because we've mostly talked about trash.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's I would say, like, some of my, like, legitimate favorite movies are, like, artistic, kind of lauded films, like, like Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I absolutely fucking adore. I do legitimately like Citizen Kane. I do really like that film. It
was nice to understand that reference people used to make.
The Rosebud reference, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, what the heck does that mean? I finally see Citizen Kane.
Yeah. I've been trying to get my wife to actually watch that, like, because we saw this article, and I think it was like IMDb's like top films from like each decade or something like that. It was like top like 50 films of the past 50 years or something along those lines. Yeah. And we're like, you know what? It's like a lot. We haven't seen like some of these. Like it might be interesting to like literally go through this list of like these.
That's a common couples thing.
Yeah. And like we're kind of in like the 1940s like era, the classic silver screen era, and she's never seen Casablanca. She's never seen. Which Casablanca's fucking fantastic too.
Citizen Gone with the Wind?
Citizen Kane, she's not seen Gone with the Wind. So I'm like,
that's surprising. That's one of the first one ladies go to.
Maltese Falcon, like all those Humphrey.
Yeah, those are legacy movies.
Humphrey Bogart, like masterpieces. It's like get in on that. Like there's some really great stuff there,
dude. I'm gonna add one to that list that kind of flies under the radar, even though it won Best Picture in 1934. There's a movie called It Happened One Night.
Yes.
Oh wow.
Yes.
Add that to your list. Have you seen it?
Absolutely.
Keith, have you seen it?
Yes.
You have seen it. Okay. So for the audience out there, if you haven't seen It Happened One Night, it might just, at first, if you look it up, because that's what millennials and Gen Zers do. They look everything up before they just try to dive in and enjoy something. But if you're going to look it up, which you shouldn't, I always say that's just killing an experience for yourself. But It Happened One Night might just seem like some dumb like rom-com from 1930s. How are you going to relate to that? Blah, blah, blah. But it's actually a really, really good movie. And, little known fact, it is responsible for the creation of two of history's most famous characters by accident. It created both Superman and it created Bugs Bunny.
Yep.
And the origin of that is that Superman specifically, Clark Kent, that side of him, is based off of the look of Clark Gable as well as Clark Gable's name. in that film. But Bugs Bunny was entirely based off of the personality of Clark Gable's character in that film. In fact, the line "What's up, Doc?" comes from that movie, along with the eating of a carrot. It all originates in that film.
Mm-hmm. I'm not
that
joking.
is an example of a good movie.
Stereotypes, acting stereotypes. That's how good the film is. Is that he pretty much created a character archetype, brand new, that no one's ever seen before. Not like tracing back to some of the older ones that almost a lot of characters are based off of today.
You know, the funniest part about that is he did that movie against his will. Back then, it wasn't like now where actors have like a ton of clout and they can choose what they're doing. They were basically indentured servants to studios. And there was some movie he had done prior where he was just very difficult on set. And so the studio was pissed at him and they basically rented him out to a different studio as a punishment for a movie he didn't want anything to do with. And so his whole personality in that movie is just him being pissed off. That he's in this movie he has no interest in. And it goes on to be, it would have been what he was known for if it weren't for the fact that he was in Gone with the Wind a few years later. But that is one of the, I would say, definitely one of the best movies of the 1930s. I would probably put it as the third best film of the 1930s, only losing out to Gone with the Wind itself and Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Wow. Knowing that now, actually, because I did not know that story beforehand, it actually played through in Clark's, in his performance. It plays through.
Yeah.
You can kind of see the irritation, and I thought that was kind of like something he'd add to his character, but I think it might have been a little bit real-world stuff. You can see that when he, when he's talking to that girl on the bench. I don't remember the scene, but, sorry about that. It's been a while since I've seen it.
If it's a great film, basically, if that movie had never been made, it's hard to even imagine how different the industry would be. Mm-hmm. Because if he hadn't made that and it hadn't been successful, like, you would not have Superman and all the stuff that goes... I mean, that's the comic book industry. Started with that. You would not have had Bugs Bunny, which means you don't get any of the animation and type of stuff that comes with that. You would not have had Gone with the Wind, which basically created the entire concept of the blockbuster film. Like, it is almost impossible to imagine what film would look like right now if it happened one night had never happened.
Oh my God! No James Dean.
Well, I mean,
probably not. I mean, like, it's
no. James Dean was the way he acted. That style was a specific style. No one would even have tried if it wasn't done before. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, but it's the ultimate butterfly effect film.
But also,
like, take that out of history, all of history changes.
But also, on the other hand, you wouldn't have Space Jam 2. So
it might be all worth it then.
It might be worth it.
Yeah.
Space Jam.
If you can delete Space Jam 2 from existence, then maybe it's
also I mean, also to like Adam's like favorite like point that he keeps hitting on. It's like, if you don't have Superman, do you not have...
You don't have Wonder Woman 84.
You don't have Wonder Woman 84.
I know where you're going.
Oh, yeah.
So basically, you take that movie out of history, you never have to have Wonder Woman 84 or Space Jam 2. So that's the flip side, man. Freedom isn't free. Sometimes bad things happen. So anyway, we've gone way over on this, but so you can get it. We could talk about movies all day, but yes,
very true.
Good movies versus guilty pleasures. Now you guys know the difference. Hopefully you have some good examples of random movies to go look at. So Keith, I want to thank you for the subject. As always, it's fun to just chit-chat about these types of things. Rob, of course, thank you for joining us. Sort of.
Shantae.
You did have to bring up Wonder Woman 84, which of course brings the whole thing down.
Wonder Woman 84 is simultaneously both a great movie and a guilty pleasure.
With little Space Jam too.
So
there is both of those are what you call tragedies. Just train wrecks that should not exist. But anyway, that's a different discussion. Maybe that Keith and I will do at some point. Yeah. Actually, that would be a fun one to just talk about those two with Rob because he loves both of them so much.
I'd be down.
But anyway, thank you to Chuck for the Olympics stuff. Joseph again for talking about all the acquisitions. Abdullah, of course, for his quiz, which I'm very happy that Rob technically failed. And the shout outs to all the other backers, Jonathan Barrett, Julian Espinoza, Luis Bonilla, Loke, Michael Kelly, and Trey Wagner. Thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you all later.
Bye-bye. You.